Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing for it's the 9th of August. It's a Tuesday, Craig. It's the morning of Rangers tie against Union in the Champions League third qualifying round, joined by Craig Vickers, who's going to be at the game with me tonight. Craig, how are you doing and how are you looking forward to the game tonight? What are you expecting?
Yeah, looking forward to it. Weather's good, so can't beat it. It's one of those sort of early evening kickoffs, especially in the summer. So now I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully an early goal to set the tone.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick reminder before we get into all the conversation about tonight and the build up to it, that as you can see on the ticker below, just £2 for 2 months. Subscribe to the Rangers Review website at the moment, www.rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. You can get all the Rangers content you could desire on there, lots of analysis, opinion, news, interviews, everything and more. We'll have loads of that tomorrow, in particular, looking back on the game. So do head over. Thanks to everyone who has done that. Good morning to Ian, or it'll be good evening, who is in Australia. Blair says he's nervous. I think that will be mirrored with a lot of people in the comments today, Blair. And a couple more good evening from Sydney, a couple of Australia viewers, which is no bad place to be whatsoever, Craig. Right, let's get right into it. What's your initial thoughts about the game, Craig? Because I was speaking to the Union manager last night. He was quite keen to stress that his side wouldn't just sit in, that they would. I think the quote was, "We want to play football. We want to play forwards." I think it'll be a really good thing for Rangers if Union do come out, because defensively, with that back five, I think Rangers have under Van Bronckhorst maybe struggled to break down teams of a similar level at points in Europe. Maybe not so much at home, but because it's a 2-goal deficit that they're protecting instead of a 1-goal, as Braga or Leipzig travelled with, it's a bit different. In saying that, Rangers also scored 3 goals against Leipzig and Braga. So there's lots of potential factors. How do you see it going? How do you see Rangers lining up? And how do you see Union come into play? Do you think they will just sit in?
Yeah, I think it's obviously. I don't think the manager's going to come out and say, "Look, we're just going to sit in, get everyone behind the ball." But I can't really see them being expansive in the way that they think. I think you look at some of the teams that maybe came to Ibrox and played with wing backs, they really stretch the pitch a lot. You see a lot of switches of play. I remember Aberdeen last season, they switched to play a lot because, it's a way to sort of slow down the game. Rangers want to get players centrally. So, yeah, I think we'll go to a back four. So I think it'll be a big sort of difference from last week in terms of the setup. Obviously, the team selection dilemma is dominated by 2 players, and whether Kent and Morelos will start and how many minutes you'll get from both of them. The way that the game will go as well. Do Rangers get an early goal, and how much does that set the tone? Do Rangers want to still be 2 goals, chasing 2 goals by the second half? So I think Union will be very. I think they'll be very conservative. I think the manager's not going to come out and say that they're going to be like that, but I think there will be spells where they do want to take a sting at the game, but especially at Ibrox, I think that's difficult for opposing teams. So yeah, I think we'll see Rangers, as we have seen a lot in these sort of European second legs, come out really quickly, and it's just it's just about sort of creating those early chances and taking one. If you can create early chances, but if you don't take it, then you're still back at square one. So yeah, I think it'll be sort of attack versus defence, but again, Rangers need to be wary of not turning the ball over as readily as they did last week, because I think Van Bronckhorst sort of alluded to that in his post-match. There was too many times where Rangers didn't look after the ball and contribute to a game where they looked very very vulnerable going in the opposite direction. So yeah, I think Rangers straight from the start. Hopefully it mirrors the sort of Leipzig and Braga games where they can get an early goal, and then that settles the crowd and also sort of settles the team on the pitch.
Yeah, and it's the risk versus reward, isn't it? Because Union, I know people have, the kind of narrative since last week has been that, they're not a great team, but this is a team that finished top of the Belgian Super League before it went to the kind of playoff rounds. They only conceded 22 non-penalty goals in a Belgian league, which is notoriously, goal heavy, transition heavy, somewhere that obviously Fashion Sakala scored a lot of goals into space. And they're set up with, I think it's Adringa and the number 13, who I can't remember, but the two players will play up front, Lightning, can be very effective in transition. And that's what Van Bronckhorst was speaking about yesterday. They need to also be organised against a team that is dangerous in transitional moments, I think he said, because I thought it was the same against Kilmarnock. Sometimes two old midfielders isn't the most flashy things, but if it gives you that control to continue the pressure and an ability to retain attacks, that's really important. I was speaking to a couple of journalists from Belgium last night at Ibrox, and they were saying, Rangers, surely they don't need to have a fast start because one goal at 80 minutes and they're still in it. And I was saying the crowd will expect, especially Craig after last season, when the Leipzig game that lives most recently in the memory, they were 2-0 up within however many minutes it was. They'll anticipate that. The other thing that they were saying is that Union only play one way. Similar themes to kind of, I guess, what maybe people like us would have been saying covering Rangers a year ago about Steven Gerrard's Rangers, that they won't change it up. A lot has been made, and Van Bronckhorst has spoken about this in press conferences before, about the fact that once he's seen a team in the second leg, he has a better idea of how to play against them. Last week, Rangers, I thought, broadly were terrible, played exactly how Union would have wanted. In front of them, the fullbacks were wing backs were so ineffective because of the angle they were receiving at. They were just passing backwards the whole time, but not good pass backwards. What do you think he'll do? Do you think he'll have learned from this? Do you think he's going to maybe go with his touchline hugging wingers as he did at the start of his Rangers career, Tillman and Lawrence? Kind of give me your thoughts on how he'll approach it, and maybe a little bit about what team that means he'll play.
Yeah, so if you sort of look at the game last week and maybe what we learned from it, I think when you play against, maybe like a 5-3-2 that Union set up in, that the one area that you can exploit is obviously outside the sort of central midfielders, that bank of three. I remember Guardiola spoke about it, I think, when City beat Man United last season.
Yeah,
I think it was the game. Yeah, when he spoke about it and said, look, it's difficult to get much joy from the width, but what you can do is pass into the spaces outside the central midfielders. And I don't think Rangers really did that at all last week, because what you had was, Tavernier and Matondo on the exact same line. Matondo wasn't really coming inside. What he was doing, Tavernier was sort of clipping the ball into him, and then would inevitably break down because he's not strong enough to hold the ball in. You had Kamara, playing, sort of occupying that sort of right half space, but he was very, very advanced. He wasn't sort of dropping deeper, I didn't think. And then you had Lundstrom, who was pretty much redundant in his role in that sort of right centre back because he wasn't really stepping up. And I thought that's one area that Rangers really lacked last week, and in terms of asking the centre backs to step up. I think on the opposite side, in terms of Sands, you didn't really have that because he is obviously a right footer, and I think that's something obviously that we touched on last week about Rangers didn't really exploit the left hand side enough, mostly because of the personnel that they deployed there. I was really surprised that Matondo wasn't playing on the left and Tillman on the right. I think that would have given Rangers a much better balance in terms of what Van Bronckhorst were trying to achieve. So I think tonight, obviously, I think we'll go back to a 4. As you say, I think we'll play with 2 sitters, and I know people roll their eyes at why are Rangers playing 2 sitters, but what that does allow is the fullbacks to play very advanced. You can't play 1 sitter and have your fullbacks in the last line as well, because then you've not got enough bodies behind the box and enough bodies behind the ball. Sorry, so I think that's what we'll see tonight. I think Rangers really need to first and foremost play with a far better tempo again than they did last week. I think that's something that Van Bronckhorst touched on, and we can sit here and discuss the setup and whether Rangers exploited the right spaces, but again, they didn't move the ball quick enough. They didn't move the ball into the middle, and obviously to create spaces elsewhere. So I think that's something that we do need to see more of tonight, is a far better tempo. I would like to see the centre back stepping in, and whether that's something that maybe we see from Ben Davies. I know we didn't see him at the weekend, and I don't think he's match fit. So I imagine we will see Sands again. So I would like to see those centre backs stepping in and having those full backs high, having those wingers inside rather than occupying the same line, because I think that's something that wasn't really effective at all last week.
Yeah, it's a really simple point, and Jimmy makes it here, but it's very true. The tempo that Rangers play with, I think against Kilmarnock, spoke about it since. They had total control, so you have to kind of, I guess, caveat any criticisms you make with that point. But equally, what Rangers have done really well in Europe and when they're at their very best is move the opposition team out of position quicker than they do when the tempo's low. So if you think of last week, Union set up not dissimilar, I think, to Frankfurt's that got them all the way to the Europa League final. Because they've got that back five, it means they've got coverage all along the pitch. They've always got someone. They can commit 4 players to press at the touchline, but they can still be pretty solid in the middle, and they can still have a player out in the far side to kind of address any switches of play concerns. But Rangers just didn't move the ball quick enough. It was so pedestrian and in front of them, and I think that would have been fine if, when the ball moves to either wing back, it's a Matondo or a Kent who can face up their fullback and attack. But when it's Tavernier and Barisic and they're receiving on their back foot to have to go back inside, it just is so mundane. And it will be a completely different side, a completely different setup. I'm sure it was a poor performance individually, I think, in terms of how Rangers executed their game plan. I think Van Bronckhorst kind of thought, I think Matondo's playing in that position, similarly how you've seen Scott Wright and Matondo against West Ham pick up that narrow position sometimes to try and get on the end of the balls that Tavernier and presumably Yilmaz are going to create from playing down the line. Worked obviously for, was it Lawrence's goal against West Ham? Whether that works long term, but it certainly seems to be a bit of a tactic in terms of pinning the fullbacks wide and allowing them to form the width of the pitch. But I'd like to see Matondo from the start tonight. I will get on to Kent and Morelos now. I find it hard to see Kent starting and Morelos. The reason is Rangers, let's say tonight, Rangers don't score within the first 30, 40 minutes and the game kind of slows down. If you've got Kent and Morelos there and they've both given what they can effectively, and you bring on then, say, Scott Wright from the bench or Cholak from the bench, I don't think that's as good an option as, say, Rangers having the fast start and relying more on the crowd and the tempo and the occasion. And then if that doesn't work, being able to almost give us a second lift in terms of bringing Kent and Morelos on for the second half. That's why I don't think they probably will start. Although in saying that, because Kent's done a full pre-season and he's only been out for a week, maybe it's a case of if his injury's not aggravated, he can play more minutes. What do you think on that, Craig? Would you start them? How do you think Morelos looked at the weekend? Or do you think that option of bringing them off the bench is maybe a bit wiser in this occasion?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think I would be more inclined to lean towards sort of bringing him off the bench, because I do agree that I think one risk you've got, especially with Morelos, in terms of him not playing, well, he's only played 30 minutes of football in the last 5 months or whatever it was. So what you've got is, especially tonight, is you're going to have a lot of sort of nervous energy, a lot of adrenaline around the ground, and I think Morelos is the type of player that sort of reflects the energy of the crowd. And I think one risk that you have is, maybe you create the chances and maybe they're not converted, and Rangers do have a scenario where it is still 0-0 at half time, and Morelos is sort of gave it his all, he's spent. And I think that's the same with Kent. I think listening to Van Bronckhorst yesterday, I think he seemed less confident about Kent starting than in terms of Morelos, because he was like, maybe Kent can make the bench. And it sounds like a sort of similar situation to Kemar Roof in the sort of Europa League final, where he's a bit like, this is a big game. We need as many of sort of game changers as we can on the bench. So, yeah, I think I would be sort of more inclined to bring them on. I think on the flip side, I think obviously the boost that it would sort of give the team, I think also John Lundstrom was asked about it yesterday in terms of having Morelos back and the boost that he can provide his teammates. I think obviously if you do have even one of them or even both of them starting from the off, the sort of energy that can give the team. So yeah, it's difficult, because I thought last week, Rangers really missed both. I think it was strange, because I think there was sort of a solution to obviously missing Kent, and I don't think Van Bronckhorst, I think he sort of neglected it in terms of his team selection. So yeah, obviously looking towards tonight, I think I would be sort of more inclined to bring them off the bench. When that is, you'd imagine maybe if it is 0-0 at half time, you do see sort of a double change. But yeah, I think I think you saw last season as well against Malmo when Morelos was pretty undercooked and obviously got the goal, but if I remember correctly, did sort of fade badly as the game went on, and that's just something that, the game sort of mirrored that as well. So, it's a good option to have both of them back, but I think obviously we do have to be careful in terms of how much Van Bronckhorst exerts him.
Yeah, Matondo didn't start at the weekend. I kind of think that was because Rangers, obviously, Scott Wright and Lawrence both moving close to Tillman. I don't think, this is a separate point, but just quickly, I don't think that Rangers expected Derek McInnes to use that system where it was very narrow and overloaded, because with Aberdeen so much used the kind of man-for-man style that was similar when he was at Aberdeen, if I remember correctly. So, Matondo, he's just not... the judgments of Matondo, he's not really had any game time yet. He came on at Kilmarnock and he got... I don't know if he officially got that assist, but the goal was made by him. In pre-season, I thought he was bright against Tottenham and West Ham. I would start him tonight, definitely. I'll take you through my predicted 11, Craig, and you can do the same. I've got yours in front of me here. And we can go through it line by line and see where we agree or disagree. We've both gone for John McLaughlin in goals. I think based on the fact that he started in Europe last week, there's not really anything new to say on that, apart from the fact that Van Bronckhorst might not be saying he's his number one, but it looks like it so far, doesn't it? Back four, both of us has gone for back four. Tavernier, Goldson, Sands. I've gone for Barisic. You've gone for Yilmaz. I've not gone for Barisic out of preference necessarily. I just think that based on what Van Bronckhorst said about Yilmaz after the game on a Saturday, still getting up to speed with his teammates and whatnot, he might not throw him into a game of this magnitude. But you would start Yilmaz. What's your thinking there?
I just think that, I do agree, obviously, in terms of Yilmaz and Saturday, and he did look a little bit hesitant, but I thought when he came on last Tuesday, he looked really bright, and it's just having that sort of greater attacking threat down the left. Obviously, I think in my team, I think I'll plump for Kent, but I do understand the argument that he isn't fit. The same with Morelos, but I just think that Yilmaz does give you that sort of greater threat in terms of down the left hand side. I think you can sort of throw that curveball in terms of what we've seen at the weekend, in terms of having him inside and having someone pinned to the touchline. So. Yeah, look, I do understand the sort of argument that Barisic is sort of tried and trusted in these games, and I think playing in the front foot probably suits Barisic a bit more than having, sort of stale possession where he can only go inside because he's not great at taking his man on 1v1 in sort of difficult situations. So, it was just about having that greater threat, but I do understand that, I don't think Yilmaz made a great case on Saturday, but obviously that's understandable in terms of literally just in the door and making his Ibrox debut, so...
as I say, I think I'd prefer to have Yilmaz in there. I agree. I thought he looked bright when he came on at the weekend. I thought he actually made some really good runs that weren't picked out against Kilmarnock. It's just whether Van Bronckhorst throws him in at the deep end. But, coming from Besiktas and playing in Turkey, he's no stranger to an atmosphere and a pressurised game. So maybe we'll see him. A midfield two for both of us. John Lundstram, obviously. I've gone for Stephen Davis. You've gone for Glenn Kamara. The reason I said Davis, and maybe thinking back, it will be Kamara, but I think it depends on the fact that, Van Bronckhorst said something along the lines of about getting through the block yesterday, basically revealing that he thinks it will be an attack versus defence because obviously Union have that 2-goal lead to protect. That's natural. I think it would be the same if Rangers were going away, if the kind of roles were reversed. Kamara, I thought, had a really good game in pre-season against Tottenham. Then has been used higher up the pitch, probably out of his natural position, and hasn't looked as good in the opening two domestic games of the season. Kind of feels now like the narrative's back to last season when it was, is he a fit for Van Bronckhorst? Van Bronckhorst can definitely use him and has done so successfully on occasion, but in terms of week in, week out. But you'd start him tonight. Would that be with Lundstram or would that be higher up the pitch, doing those runs kind of beyond the striker that we've seen at points since Van Bronckhorst came in?
I think what I wrote in the article was sort of using him, slightly higher than Lundstram, but no, obviously, in between the lines, that's not something that I think we've established that he's not a great fit in terms of the role he was playing last weekend. They've been, and obviously you had Tillman coming in off the left, but Rangers weren't really exploiting that side. So, I do understand the argument for Davis. I thought he was sort of man of the match or close to man of the match on Saturday, but I think think especially after the reaction from last week, in terms of, I know there was a lot of sort of stick heading in Kamara's direction, but
Yeah.
I think he's sort of great for these games in terms of his ability to sort of receive, and I think that's something that I wrote in terms of using him, a little bit higher than Lundstram. I think what you've got with Davis is, if Davis does start, I think it's pretty clear what Van Bronckhorst's plan will be. Davis will fit into that sort of right back role and allow Tavernier to go higher. So I think you'll get that indication as soon as the team sheet hits. So
yeah,
it'd be interesting. I think it's interesting that both, obviously neither of us have went for Ryan Jack, which was obviously him and Lundstram were the staple of that run to the Europa League. But I think we can both agree that he didn't have his finest night last Tuesday, and I don't think, as I think I said to Derek last week, I don't think he's had his finest night in quite a while, to be honest. But maybe that's a separate discussion. But I think that I don't think there'd be too many qualms if Davis started, to be honest.
I think reading into it further, Davis hasn't really played much European football. Certainly these home games under Van Bronckhorst, I think it'll be quite telling Van Bronckhorst's team selection whether he's going for the kind of 2 goals within 20 minutes and trying to overwhelm Union, which is certainly what the home crowd will want, or if he's playing the long game with the Davis. Again, bringing Davis off the bench, I think is a great option because he can just change the tempo of games, lift the tempo. Old Firm semi-final, Europa League final, and a number of times he's done that. Good friend of the show, Adam, gets in touch to say that he thinks it's important Yilmaz gets up to speed as soon as possible, so just keep playing him. And it's a fair point. It's all very well saying that this is a new player, maybe ease him in, but Rangers squad is full of them now. And I guess you do have to play your strongest team, so be intriguing to see what happens there tonight. But you kind of, both of you have maybe swayed me a little bit on that one. Right, let's move up a line. I've gone for Matondo, Tillman and Lawrence. For the reasons outlined, I just don't think, reading between the lines, that Kent will be fit enough. Matondo from the right, Tillman, I thought, I don't know about you, Craig, but I am on the Tillman hype train. Johnny and Derek yesterday were saying they're not. I think he's been really good in the first couple of games.
They're not on the hype train.
No, they're not on the hype train, I know, but they're old.
What was the justification for that?
I don't know, to be honest. I was kind of shocked in the first instance. I think they were saying end product and he'd faded a bit. But I think if you look at someone coming into those 2 types of games, in the Scottish Premiership, it's a pretty good start, presuming that his levels don't drop off. I'd like to see him play kind of centrally tonight, as opposed to from the left against when he was away in Belgium. If Kent doesn't start, are you playing Lawrence from that side, presumably? Craig, the only other option is Sakala, who you've written about on the website today, or Scott Wright. But you've went for Matondo, Tillman, Kent. But if Kent isn't playing, who are you playing then?
Yeah, I think it will be Lawrence off the left. I think last week, I think certainly my team selection would have been having Wright on the right and Matondo on the left, but obviously we never saw that. And to be fair, Tillman obviously came into a lot of people's surprise, and he played very well that night. So yeah, I think it would be, and it would be interesting, if Lawrence was playing off the left in terms of your team selection at left back. I think that would lend itself more to probably more to Barisic, to be honest. And and obviously because he obviously has extensive experience, especially under Gerrard, playing with a sort of narrow winger inside. So yeah, I think it would probably be Lawrence from the left. Obviously you would like to see 2 wingers, but that's something that sort of increasingly Van Bronckhorst is moving away from. Maybe that's probably due to personnel in terms of not having Kent available. But I think it would be sort of Lawrence off left. I think that's I think obviously finding a way to get Lawrence into the team isn't a bad thing, to be honest, because I think you saw at the weekend in terms of his ability to find the target. He's a very proficient shooter. Sort of spoken and written extensively about his goal threat. So finding a way to get him into the team, I don't think would be a bad thing, especially alongside a more sort of creative threat like Tillman. So yeah, I think if Kent doesn't start, I imagine we'll see Lawrence, because I think as well something that was spotty for Lawrence is his sort of ability off the ball as well. He was very sort of aggressive in terms of the ability to counter press. That's something that I noticed against Livingston. He was very strong in terms of defensive duels. So yeah, I think we'll see Lawrence off the left if Kent isn't available.
Yeah, and he obviously got the assist for Cholak on Saturday, although both Rangers goals kind of came not from breaking Kilmarnock down, which will be interesting to see how they do that tonight. I thought they looked better in pre-season, but then pre-season is pre-season, isn't it? So maybe we can't use that too much as an example when playing against the low block. But just before we go into the striker, you cast your mind back to Braga last season when the Rangers only crossed the ball 12 times. The fullbacks couldn't get around the marker to cross, but they only crossed the ball 12 times last week in Belgium, which must be some sort of record low in Europe in the last few seasons. It's certainly lower than we've come to expect. And I think almost they need to cross more, which feels strange telling a Rangers team to cross more after the last few years. But also I think it's a demonstration that Van Bronckhorst is trying to attack in different ways, and that worked against Braga in particular. It'll be interesting to see how that happens tonight. And I guess that leads us on to who plays up front. I've gone for Cholak, you've gone for Morelos. Again, the reason being that if Morelos is fit to do a 90 minutes, great, but because that's his first minutes in 5 months or so, Craig, it feels like a big ask. I like the idea of having them as impact subs, even if Rangers, if they go 2-0 up and you have Kent and Morelos to bring on and just counter-attack for the last half an hour or provide that threat, excellent. If you need 2 goals and it's 0-0 after an hour, it's equally, it's going to, I think, give everyone a lift. I presume you're in a similar, method of thinking that if Morelos is fit, you play him, but if not, maybe save him for the second half. So I'll ask you instead how you thought Cholak did at the weekend. I thought you could see that. I asked him after the game, do you think you were adapting to the style of play and your teammates are adapting to you? And he kind of said a lot of interesting things in the interview, one of which was, I'm a striker, I've not forgot how to score goals. And that's, I think, the confidence that you need. I thought you could see the quality of his finish. He's not really had an opportunity like that since he came to the club. But still, I think you can see his limitations outside the box. And I guess there's a question tonight of, do you need someone who's going to be able to move the centre-backs and create space in the middle if it's going to be really congested?
Yeah, and I think sort of spot on there. I think in terms of the weekend, it was, first half, I think, people were sort of back to what they were saying post-Tuesday night in terms of, doesn't drop off, doesn't get involved enough. And I think obviously the second half, once he does get a goal, people are a little bit more encouraged and saying, look, he's doing what he's been brought to the club to do. He's scored, he's finished the chance he's created. Thought it was a really good finish in terms of how quickly he got the ball at his feet and sort of struck it low and to the bottom corner. So I think in Europe especially, I think the loss of Morelos is really pronounced. I thought you saw that again last Tuesday in terms of obviously Rangers, when they are faced with the scenario that they were against in Belgium in terms of not being able to play through Union, they didn't really have that opportunity to play sort of directly into the striker and maybe gain territory from there.
Yeah.
I thought that's something that Cholak lacked, and I think you saw that with the Goldson scenario near the end when Van Zier nearly went through and made it 3 in terms of players just not being on the same wavelength and sort of suffering a bit of muscle memory from Morelos in terms of you expect him to drop off, and when everybody else is marked, you can sort of play into him. But that's something that I wrote last week in terms of, do you need to sort of reconfigure the way the team plays?
Yeah.
With Cholak and team, but I think Van Bronckhorst will sort of look at it and say, look, we didn't bring him in to lead the line in Europe. We brought him in so he can provide another option to Morelos domestically. Doesn't maybe bringing him on or playing against some weaker opponents where they're just pinning these teams into their own defensive third. So yeah, it's difficult because I think there's a risk that we're back to Groundhog Day in terms of tonight, and also looking back to last week in terms of Cholak, in terms of not being able to play into him, in terms of you need to go around, you need to play into the wings, you aren't able to go central, and you aren't able to connect with your number 9, which is obviously crucial in Europe. So I think it'll be different, obviously, in terms of Rangers will be able to play much higher up the pitch than they were last week, just by virtue of you're at Ibrox and teams are a little bit coward and will sort of relapse into sort of deep defensive blocks. So it'll be interesting to see how how direct maybe Rangers are, tonight, because I think that's something that you saw in the Europa League final, and I know that people have touched upon how we're a lot more patient in terms of how we build play, and I think you sort of saw that last Tuesday as well. But whether Van Bronckhorst just goes back to what he knows and what he trusts and what's been effective in these European games in terms of maybe going over the block if Union do sit in a sort of mid block. So yeah, it would be interesting to see. In terms of I think obviously I put down Morelos to start, but easily I think that Cholak could start, and then you've got the option to bring on Morelos at half time if you are chasing a goal or two. So
it's a good option to have, and not a good problem to have, but it's better to have Morelos and Kent back than if they weren't both available. And I completely agree with you, Craig. I think it'll be intriguing to see what the manager does. We'll both be there at the game tonight. We'll be live doing a little briefing before the game and after as well. And we'll be obviously in the press conference. Loads of content coming your way over on the website. Just £2 for 2 months. Craig, looking forward to it. I'll give you a chance to put a score prediction in 90 minutes. And then if it does go to extra time, include that as well.
2-0 in 90 minutes. And I think we'll just go 1-0 in extra time.
That's what I was going to say because it's safe. I will say 3-1 and then penalty kicks. Why not? Something just to get the heart rate going. But Rangers, I just seen a comment come in there that I've now lost. But you look at their home legs under Van Bronckhorst. Ibrox has been a really strong fortress for them to go and win these European ties over 2 legs. So I think there's justified reason for people heading along to be confident tonight. Or equally, I think Union are a really good counter-attacking side, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also get a goal as well. So it's going to be an intriguing one. Do enjoy the game if you're heading along. Join us on the briefing before and after. We'll be back tomorrow morning, of course, for a detailed look back at the game with lots of stuff on the website as well. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.